coming up.
Do you do any subcontracting with GC Strategies, also known as Government of Canada Strategies, or Dalian or Coridex?
So we have no relationship with GC Strategies. We have a past relationship with Dalian.
Government officials at one point conspired with GC Strategies to get them parts of this deal. So it seems like a big demonstration of problems in our procurement system that the government has repeatedly gone to GC Strategies and Dalian. What I'm trying to understand about the procurement system here is that Dalian identifies as an Indigenous company. It benefits from Indigenous set-asides in getting procurement. In the case of these projects with CBSA, they may have, in the process of getting this contract, benefited from that set-aside. They then subcontracted to you, but pardon me, they didn't subcontract to you. As you said, they hired you to do the work, and you are not an Indigenous company. So that it seems like a good deal for you. You were hired to do work. It seems like a good deal for Dalian in that they don't have internal IT capacity. They presumably didn't add value to the project. They made money. You made money, but because of their involvement, taxpayers paid more, and this seems like a pretty significant manipulation of the Indigenous set-aside rule. Do you have a sense of why Amazon didn't just get this contract directly?
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Without further ado, let me welcome our witnesses. From Amazon Web Services, Inc., Nicole Foster, Director, Global Artificial Intelligence in Canada Public Policy, and Nick Marcoux, Head of Professional Services, Canada Public Sector. Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to appear today. From BDO Canada, Mike Abbott, Managing Partner, Markets and Industry. Thank you for being here. And from Microsoft Canada, Inc., John Weigelt, Chief Technology Officer. Thank you for being here.
The focus, thank you, merci. The focus on my first round of questioning will be on relationships, and in particular relationships with the government as it relates to BDO and Amazon Web Services. So the question first to Amazon Web representatives. In relation to the Arrive scam, as we call it on this side of the House, I understand that you billed almost $4.3 million to the PSPC. And I also understand that at no time were you the actual contractor. You were the subcontractor. Is that correct?
No, we were not a subcontractor. We had a direct
You had a direct contract with the Government of Canada?
Correct.
Okay. Was that with CBSA?
It was through the Cloud Framework Agreement.
Okay. Did you do any subcontracting with GC Strategies, also known as Government of Canada Strategies, or Dalian or Coridex?
So we have no relationship with GC Strategies. We have a past relationship with Dalian.
Okay, let's talk about Dalian. Bill Curry, a reporter for the Globe and Mail last Saturday, April the 6th, wrote a story. The heading was Beneath the Arrive Can, and contained within that article is a quote, and I'm going to read it out. Dalian's website gives the impression that it is an independent company. It describes itself as Aboriginally owned, veteran operated, and lists several global tech giants as vendors, including Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, and Dell Technologies. How many contracts did you have with Dalian?
Between 2 and 3, I'm not sure exactly.
And the value, please?
The value of, if I can explain the relationship with Dalian. The original mandate that we worked on with Dalian was, we worked for Dalian specifically, and that was related to a migration project for the benefit of CBSA.
I need to know all the specifics, ma'am.
That goes back to
Ma'am, I don't need to know all the specifics. 2 to 3. What is it, 2 or 3 contracts with Dalian?
So I can provide clarity on this. There were 3 contracts. One of the contracts was a $0 amendment to the end date of the contract.
Okay. So Dalian is the contractor, you're the subcontractor. The value of the two contracts were how much?
We were not a subcontractor.
Dalian?
Dalian was our customer. We were not a subcontractor to Dalian.
Well, Dalian it was your customer, but Dalian is working with the government of Canada.
To be clear, Dalian was our customer. We did understand that the work was for the benefit of CBSA, but it was not a subcontract.
Okay, well, we're not going to get into semantics. The ultimate benefactor of your work was the government of Canada, specifically the CBSA. So let's get to the answer now to my question. What was the value of the two contracts that you worked with Dalian?
The total value of the work that we undertook with Dalian, I believe, was $1.1 million
For the both contracts?
for all of the work we did with Dalian.
Okay, and you confirm you never worked with GC Strategies?
Never worked with GC.
Did you work with any other contractor other than Dalian?
Of the ones that you've listed, or
Anyone involving the Arrive scam, any other contractors?
No, we did not work with any other of the vendors on ArriveCan.
Okay, now you, ma'am, Miss Foster, I understand you worked for the Liberal government until 2004,
Correct.
and what was your role?
I was a legislative assistant
For a member?
for Minister David Anderson when he was Minister of the Environment.
Okay, I understand you're currently a Liberal donor,
I am.
right? And your last donation was in September of 2023?
Yes, I'm a long-time advocate of women's participation in politics of this country.
Okay,
and I
thank
do
you.
that on a
I
multi-partisan
didn't ask
basis.
for an explanation.
Point
I
of
asked
order,
for-
Chair.
worked with members.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I think you know. I think you know. What
Go-
is
go
the
ahead, Ms.
relevance of this line of questioning?
Well, okay, Ms.
Yeah,
Shannon,
what does
that's
it-
that.
yeah.
Okay, hold on, Ms. Shannon. That's not a quite a. That's okay, Mr. Barrett.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get us out of here on time, or as close as possible. Now, Ms. Shannon, that is not a point of order. One of your members is up next, and if there's additional questions you have for Ms. Foster, none of us in this room think that political participation is a bad thing. In fact, I think we all encourage it. And I will note that you have dined out on a membership or on a donor card that's been displayed here, and I have not stopped you from doing that. So we will continue to hear from Mr. Brock and Ms. Foster, who is doing a fine job answering his questions. We'll continue to do that, and then it'll be one of your members will have the turn.
Chair, if I can just say, it's a difference between when a witness volunteers information and when a witness is being particularly questioned about their political affiliation.
No, Ms. Shanahan. The point of this is to ask questions and to get answers. Mr. Brock, you have a minute and a half left.
Good try.
Nice try, Ms. Shanahan, because witnesses, you don't understand, this particular member went on great length to highlight a certain allegiance that one of previous
Chair.
witnesses had to the Conservative
Chair,
Party of
I asked
Canada.
for- I
This is
asked
my
for-
time. This is my time.
Ms. Shanahan, I said nothing, did not cut you off, certainly, when you were questioning a witness about donations and membership. Ms. Foster, there is certainly nothing wrong with being involved. I appreciate you answering the question. I would ask government members to hold off. In just under a minute and a half, you will be able to ask these witnesses all the questions you like. Mr. Brock, you have a minute and a half.
Again, I didn't ask you to expand upon why you are donating. I wanted to know, did you donate in September of 2023? You said yes, and how much was that donation?
I make regular monthly donations.
Right. I understand since 2005, you've contributed $33,000 to the Liberal Party of Canada. Does that sound accurate?
It doesn't sound inaccurate, but I can't confirm that. number.
Certainly. Okay. Moving on to BDO. Similar type of questions. Did you work with GC Strategies?
We had a working relationship through our Lixar division. We acquired Lixar in March of 2020.
Did you work with GC Strategies, sir?
Our Lixar division did.
Yes.
And so we did.
And how many contracts?
With ArriveCan, we had one.
Yes.
At large, I would have to come back and give you the specific numbers.
Can you do that for us?
I can do that for you.
Okay. And how about Dalian and Coridex? Did you work with them?
Coridex, no. Dalian for ArriveCan, no. There are, and I'll come back with a specific number. It's in the range of 3 to 4 outside of the scope of ArriveCan.
3 to 4 contracts.
Contracts, yes.
And you were the subcontractor, Dalian
Correct.
being the contractor to a department of the Government of Canada.
That's correct.
A ballpark figure in terms of the dollar value?
I'll give you a ballpark, like rough order of magnitude was about 800,000. It could have crept up to $1 million. So I'll give that as the rough order of magnitude
Okay.
collective for the
Okay,
contracts.
time permitting?
You got one quick one.
One quick one. To Mr. Abbott and Ms. Foster, were you directed by any government official to specifically work with Dalian and or GC Strategies?
Can I answer that first? No.
Ms. Foster?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we had several testimonies in this committee regarding some of the contracting of GC Strategies and the awareness of GC Strategies. We understood that there was, quote, a well-known community that GC Strategies was a part of, to which contractors of the government were known to this group. Were you aware of Christian Firth or any members of GC Strategies, even without directly working or engaging with them through Lixar?
I can tell you I did not. My experience, I've probably had seen the name GC Strategies and looking at contracts that had been published on the opengovernment.ca, platform over the years, but I didn't have an awareness in any way, shape, or form.
Ms. Foster, can you confirm for this committee what Amazon Web Services believe is the accurate figure for how much you were paid for your work on ArriveCan?
So it is admittedly a little bit difficult to confirm in terms of the cloud computing utility amount. It is easier for us to confirm the amount that we were contracted for advisory services. So that amount was $4.6 million in terms of the advisory services provided.
So you can't give us a number of the cloud services?
The estimate that the Auditor General is in the range of being correct. The reason it is difficult for us to determine exactly is that the app continues to run today on the cloud, in addition to 40 other workloads that CBSA runs on AWS. So we have assigned account numbers for a number of different workloads.
I'm just going to cut you off there. I get the sense of where you're going. Would you be willing to provide to this committee a breakdown of that of those accounts and the amount that you see from the cloud services up until today's date?
CBSA could provide that detail. So we do. They have a number of accounts that we don't know what the workload is assigned to. So we can't see, for example, which, due to our security and confidentiality, we actually don't have visibility into what our customers are exactly doing in those workloads. So they can tell us that there's a workload assigned to CBSA and we can provide the number for that account number, but we don't have the detailed visibility on which account is doing what.
I may circle back to this because I think there's a lot more there. But who at CBSA was the principal contact for AWS at CBSA?
Do you have that? Who was your contact?
Yeah, so we had worked with the CBSA technical team. A gentleman named Ken Sang was, I believe, the director. I don't recall his title exactly. He was the director of the technical team that was leading the ArriveCan program, amongst others.
So AWS is a registered lobbyist with the federal government. When AWS met with Middlemen in May of 2022, what was discussed?
I was not in that meeting, so I can't confirm the detail of what was discussed. So I would need to verify who was in that meeting, but it could.
Could you come back to us with that information?
Sure.
And what the topic was that was discussed. Circling back just briefly, CBSA has been accused, specifically Middlemen, of actually deleting emails. So I'm going to go back to you and ask that you provide this committee with as much information as you can about the costing for the cloud to CBSA. Even if you're not unable to provide us with the specific accounts, we'd be interested in knowing the broad amounts and what was charged CBSA for cloud services up until the current date, because frankly we can't trust what CBSA has because of the deletion of documents. Would you be able to provide us with that?
Maybe I will clarify with you what would be useful, but I'm happy to sort of try to be helpful to the committee in their work.
We will circle back through the chair for that information through our analysts. Mr. Abbott, can you confirm that prior to beginning your work with BDO, you spent some time with Deloitte? Is that correct?
correct.
About 25 years?
That's correct.
While at Deloitte, were you involved at all or aware of a project called CARM, the CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management Digital Initiative?
Yes.
Do you consider in your work on that or your awareness of that, were there ever any concerns expressed by CBSA about Deloitte's work on the CARM initiative?
I'm not sure. Like I will for the purpose of ArriveCan. I'll just put it. I'd say that's some of those questions will be best directed towards Deloitte because I'm representing BDO. But I'll answer from a perspective. There was certainly, like other large projects, points of contention and things that worked well and things that didn't work well. I would not have described it as, points of contention, but certainly things that, where things weren't working. There was meetings of the minds, if you will, and to try to clear that up and move it forward.
So you would say that there were challenges or concerns expressed by CBSA about the CARM initiative?
I would say similar to any other project where it's large scale in nature, that not everything goes exactly from the day one plan, and I would characterize it that way as opposed to saying that there was concerns. I can speak to it from that perspective.
So CARM will be launching on May 13th. Are you confident that it'll launch successfully?
I haven't been part of that project for 3 years, so I really wouldn't have a perspective to answer on that.
Ms. Foster, you mentioned that you were aware of Dalian, and your relationship with Dalian was one of a customer-client relationship. You denied an accusation from one of our colleagues here related to being a subcontractor. It seems to me if you had awareness of the primary contract or the task authorization of Dalian, and you knew that you'd become a client, or they'd become a client of yours for production of work that they would then use to meet the needs of the task authorization, isn't that the same as being a subcontractor?
No, it's not the same as being a subcontractor. So being a subcontractor would mean that you agree to the terms of the original contract. We were not a subcontractor to the original contract. We provided.
Aware of that when you signed that agreement, that would be the case for subcontractors?
So I can't speak to that. I don't have
Why
that
not?
information. I don't have that information.
It's a simple question. Did
I
you have
didn't-
knowledge,
well,
Ms.
I
Foster?
was-
I'll
I
ask
do
it
not
another
have
way. I'll
direct
ask it another way for
knowledge.
you. You were just agreed. You had knowledge of task authorizations given to Dalian. You knew that Dalian was in fact going to look for subcontractors. You can call it a client-customer relationship, but you did work for Dalian, which was doing work for GC
So,
Strategies, correct?
I cannot agree with most of what you've just said.
But did you do work for Dalian?
We did work for Dalian.
And did Dalian do work for GC Strategies?
I don't know if Dalian did work for GC Strategy.
Did you know that Dalian did work for the government?
We were aware that the work was for the benefit of CBSA.
Did you at any moment say, maybe I should contact the CBSA directly?
That would have been inappropriate.
You believe that it was more appropriate to work with this company, which was one person, opposed to working with the task
work with-
authorization body
We work
that
with
would issue that
companies
task
of all
authorization.
sizes that do produce work that may be a customer of ours, that may be one person.
So you do no reviews of customers.
Of customers.
Well, in this case, you're calling Dalian a customer. So I'm trying to understand your relationship with Dalian.
No, we do
You're
not.
saying-
We do not do due diligence on all of our customers.
And so you did not, what did you know of Dalian then when you accepted that work? That they worked for the government? Was that it?
We understood that they had they needed work from us. They contracted us to do work for the benefit of CBSA, and we performed that work.
But you know, as like a public service, you know that would be strange, don't you know? Especially as a former person working in
It's
this
not
place.
strange. It's actually extremely normal in the course of our business that a number of companies.
And this is exactly why we have this problem.
A number
is
of
because of the way that your company is operating and how it's taking advantage of general contractors in this case, and they're
Thank
taking
you,
advantage
Mr.
of us.
Desjardins. That is the time. You'll have another opportunity. Turning now to Mr. Barrett. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
I want to follow up on my colleague's question about Min Doan, who was the Chief Information Officer, who's been accused of destroying documents and records related to Justin Trudeau's $60 million Arrive scam. And this is something that the Access to Information Commissioner is investigating. Is there any reason that come to mind that emails and documents from Amazon would be in the destroyed documents?
don't have any knowledge of what documents were or weren't destroyed.
Can you tell us what the total amount in contracts that Amazon has had with the Canada Border Service Agency since 2015?
I don't know about the value of the contracts, but in the last year, we did approximately $20 million of work for CBSA. We would expect that number may fluctuate based on usage of cloud computing.
How many active contracts do you currently have with CBSA?
I believe that all of the work is within one contract or the cloud framework agreement.
Will you undertake to provide the total amount in contracts that Amazon has had with CBSA since 2015? Could you provide that to the committee?
I believe we could provide that.
Thank you very much. How many meetings did the Liberal government have with Amazon on ArriveCan?
None.
No phone calls?
So by Liberal government, you mean the political level of government? Is that what you're referring to?
Let's parse it out. Who had phone calls, meetings, Zoom?
So there were nobody on my team, which is the public policy team, had any meetings with any government officials at any level on ArriveCan.
So no government officials. So no one who worked for the Government of Canada.
Nobody who worked for the Government of Canada at the political level or the bureaucratic level.
Okay. So there was no connection between Amazon and the Government of Canada, any of its departments, agencies, and Amazon or any of its subsidiaries. There was no conversations.
Well, obviously there was client engagement conversations that took place. So there was direct work that was contracted, and so there was absolutely interactions at a working level on this work, but there was no lobbying activity on this work.
So there was no lobbying activity as it dealt with ArriveCan?
No.
So that were there any gifts or hospitality by Amazon to government officials?
I understand the committee has become aware of a backpack that was gifted to both staff and officials that had worked on the project. And that is all that I know of in terms of gifts. It was a small token of recognition at the end of a large project.
So we became aware of it, but even just in your answer before, there's no lobbying activity. So
No.
Gifts to government officials that are branded with your logo, you don't consider that to be lobbying activity?
No.
No, so you haven't had any other hospitality that's been given. So just free bags, but no drinks, dinners, coffees, anything
No,
of that nature.
I think in the normal course of business, there would be minimal hospitality that would have taken place.
Okay, is that something that you've tracked?
We do have a corporate policy that outlines what the guidelines are for that activity and training for employees around that activity. And yes, we do have a reporting system.
Okay, so it's part of your business model that there's some gifts, that there's some hospitality with government officials and with the private sector, yes? Okay,
Yes.
and are you able to enumerate the occasions on which it occurred with government officials, who the government officials were, and what the gifts were that were given?
So our system is designed to identify who the officials were and what the gift was.
Okay, can you furnish that information to the committee, please?
I can follow up with that information.
Thank you very much. And just to be clear with precision, were there any government officials and Amazon employees who met outside of government offices? And if yes, can that be those details be included in your return to the committee?
So in the normal course of business, meetings may take place outside of government offices. They may take place in our corporate offices. They may take place.
I understand the concept. I'm asking if you'll provide the details of those meetings in the return that you committed to with respect to your previous answer.
I would have to verify, but I do not believe we track that information in terms of the location of where meetings take place.
But if it exists, you will provide it?
We don't have a regular system to track that, I don't think, but if we do have it, I would be happy to provide it.
Thank you very much. Up next, suivant, c'est Ms. Bradford.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
have the
Chair.
floor for 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to the witnesses for coming today. So could each one of the companies please answer the question about how long that you've been doing work with the Government of Canada, just for the record? I'll start with left to right.
So I was in uniform with the government. I'm not sure if that counts. From 1986 until 2000, worked in Treasury Board till 2003, and I've been working helping government since then for 20 years here at Microsoft.
Microsoft has 20 years. Okay, or you have with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have
Mr.
worked
Abbott.
for about 10 years
Okay.
working with the Government of Canada.
Ms. Foster?
Prior to the framework agreement in 2020, it would have been very, very minimal work. We launched our infrastructure in Canada in 2012, but it took some time for there to be procurement avenues available in Canada.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a chance to complete an answer. I think you got cut off before. Could you please expand on, the difference between subcontracting and being a customer directly?
So it's a legal differentiation. When you're a subcontractor, that means that you also adopt the original terms of the original contract. In the case of cloud computing, that is often very difficult, or was very difficult prior to the Cloud Framework Agreement. The Government of Canada did not have existing legal frameworks for procuring cloud, and as I mentioned before, procuring cloud is very, very different than procuring hardware or software. And so quite often, a lot of the terms in traditional IT contracts would be very inappropriate for cloud. And so we would not have assumed the responsibilities as a subcontractor for those terms and services. Instead, would have been treated those relationships as a customer of ours, not as a subcontractor to their contract.
Okay, and I understood from what you said before that the work with the ArriveCAN app still continues and they're still being billed for the cloud relationship continues. And so is that like a monthly subscription, or is it based on the time or the usage?
Yeah, it's based on consumption or usage. So it's actually an ideal application for cloud in the sense that as your usage increases, for example, with increased travelers around holiday times and you reach peak, the system can accommodate those peak usages. And when you don't use those peak usages, you'll only be billed for the use that you require at that time.
Thank you, Chair. There's one thing that I'm quite struck by in today's hearing. We have Amazon, Microsoft, and BDO here, three very large and serious companies. Clearly, it's clear that you're taking this hearing seriously and that you've done a lot of detailed preparation. That's not an endorsement of everything you've said necessarily, but you're clearly taking this seriously. And there is a stark contrast between your testimony and the testimony of GC Strategies and Dalian that we've heard before Parliament. Two-person companies that specialize only in getting government contracts, that were completely unprepared, that were unable to answer critical questions and badly contradicted themselves. And yet, the government has gone to GC Strategies to do most of this project, mostly through sole sourcing, and government officials at one point conspired with GC Strategies to get them parts of this deal. So it seems like a big demonstration of problems in our procurement system that the government has repeatedly gone to GC Strategies and Dalian in spite of the obvious problems that have been well on display before committees. I want to ask each of you, if your company would have had the capacity to build the ArriveCAN app yourself, and if you could have built all of it or at least done more of it, why didn't you? Why do you think it ended up that it was GC Strategies and Dalian instead of some of these names that Canadians would recognize? So we'll start with Microsoft on that, as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. So Microsoft is a partner-driven company. We have 16,500 partners in Canada that build atop a platform. And so our business model is to enable Canadian organizations to build this type of capability.
So you could have built it?
We don't build these types of
But your
tools.
partner companies could have
Correct.
built it. And why? So why didn't you? Why didn't you put in a proposal to the government for your partners to build the app?
So our partners would lead that. We would not lead that proposal.
Okay.
And so we were 100% reliant on partners to build on those specialized solutions.
Okay, but why did none of your partners do this?
I can't answer for my partners.
Okay. Mr. Abbott?
Sure, and I listen. I certainly haven't seen all of the specs and requirements and stakeholders required for ArriveCan. I can speak to
It's an app, though, basically.
the piece. It is, but I can only speak to the pieces that we've seen. And I certainly would not second guess the Auditor General and their findings in terms of what that looked like. Don't have the same level of access to that to those specifications. So to the question of could we have done that, it's speculative. I don't have access to all of the requirements that were there. I realize it's an app, but there's some complicated features, as we found in the optical reader technology.
Did you look into building it, though? I mean,
we never looked at.
And why didn't you look into building it?
Simply at the time we didn't have the capabilities when this started. We do now. But we didn't.
Ms. Foster?
My answer is very similar to
okay.
my Microsoft colleague. I can add a bit of.
Well, I get the impression that people don't want to go too far down the road of being critical of the procurement process. It just, and I don't want to put you press you if you but it seems like a clear problem to me that big companies, names that Canadians recognize, didn't even think to bid on this critical project, and yet we went to GC Strategies, to Dalian, to these two-person shops that did no work and subcontracted it with all of the attendant problems.
Happy to share a
Sure,
couple of quick things for your consideration and the consideration of this committee. AWS would not have been on a contract like this. It is not the kind of work that we do. However, there are two factors that I think the committee may want to take note of. One is the continued underinvestment in the improving the digital skills of the public service. That is a long-term systemic problem. And, in addition to whether or not public servants could build this, that could be part of the answer. But in addition to that, that part of it is you also don't have procurement officials that understand how to procure these systems properly and design the projects and manage the projects. So it's not just hiring builders, it's also hiring a public service and building a public service that has far stronger digital skills than you have today.
And just to comment on that, I mean, the government's position seems to have been that they're not capable of performing a general contracting function for going out and finding the talent to build an app, which is why they contracted to companies who then subcontracted on most of the work. It's clearly a broken system that the government put it out to companies that simply went on LinkedIn, found people, and subcontracted it. I don't know if it's interference or if it's a lack of digital skills or something else. But clearly the system is badly broken.
That is your time. Through me, and I'll go ahead.
Just on the through you, Chair, correspondence related to to the tasks of Dalian and the outcomes or deliverables related to the work that Amazon Web Services had done that are directly cited in the task authorizations. Any relevant information that Dalian, through a task authorization that was then offloaded to the work of Amazon, we need to know what that work is.
Yeah, we might. I'd be curious to get an answer from Ms. Foster, but we might have to circle back around. Is that something you could provide, or?
We don't operate under a task authorization system, so no, we wouldn't be able to produce it because it's not how.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Our work is engaged.
So,
between them and Dalian.
I would have to see what we would still have. I mean, the work that we did with Dalian was over 5 years ago now.
Okay.
I think it'd be important to see the information.
Tell you what, Mr. Digely, let's discuss it in subcommittee business.
Sure.
Ms. Foster has proven to be a candid witness today, and if we have questions, we'll get back to you, and we'll see where we end up. And I do hear what you're saying about the timeline. So I'd rather have a longer discussion when we're not on the clock. I have two more members to ask questions, but your concerns have been flagged, and I think we will certainly discuss it, and we'll see where it goes. Is that all right for now, Mr. Digely? But your concerns have been raised and noted. I'll turn now to Mr. Genuis, the second last member. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please, and Mr. Chen will finishes up for the day. Over to you, Mr. Jennis.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Foster, I want to ask you about the contracts that Amazon had with Dalian. You had said earlier worth $1.1 million in total. Were all of these contracts ones for which CBSA was the ultimate beneficiary of the work?
Yes. So the initial program of work was really related to a migration that had nothing to do. They needed.
I understand they were distinct from ArriveCAN. Yeah.
Okay. So they needed assistance with migrating workloads to the cloud. That support was provided, and then there was it is less than $100,000 of work that could be that we can sort of identify as being related to ArriveCAN, but it was a very minimal amount of work.
So it was migrating services to the cloud, doing that for Dalian, for which CBSA was the ultimate beneficiary. Were there multiple companies working for Dalian on these projects, or were basically you were the ones that were providing that work for Dalian?
On this one, we would have no line of sight on who Dalian was working with outside of us.
Okay, but for the specific project, you didn't have line of sight on any other companies involved. They received a contract for CBSA to do what in general? To do that same migration?
We don't know specifically what their contract was for with CBSA. And in the case of this migration piece of work, we just had our own contract. We were not working with any other firms at the time and had no visibility.
Okay, but these were CBSA files or CBSA information? It wasn't Dalian internal files. It was CBSA's information that you were moving to the cloud as part of a contract that you had with Dalian. Is that correct?
It was CBSA workloads.
Right. Okay. So you were moving CBSA workloads to the cloud, but Dalian had hired you to do that. Dalian is notionally an Indigenous company, which means that it benefits from Indigenous set-asides in procurement. Is Amazon an Indigenous company, and were any of the employees who worked on this project for Dalian Indigenous?
No, we are not an Indigenous company, and there may have been employees that were Indigenous that worked on the project, but I can't say yes or no.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what percentage of your overall workforce is Indigenous?
We do in Canada, but I don't recall that number off the top of my head.
Okay, ballpark, is it the same as the proportion in the overall population, a little higher, a little lower?
That would be a good ballpark, but I'm honestly not sure.
Okay. What I'm trying to understand about the procurement system here is that Dalian identifies as an Indigenous company. It benefits from Indigenous set-asides in getting procurement. In the case of these projects with CBSA, they may have, in the process of getting this contract, benefited from that set-aside. They then subcontracted to you, but pardon me, they didn't subcontract to you. As you said, they hired you to do the work, and you are not an Indigenous company. So that it seems like a good deal for you. You were hired to do work. It seems like a good deal for Dalian in that they don't have internal IT capacity. They presumably didn't add value to the project. They made money. You made money, but because of their involvement, taxpayers paid more, and this seems like a pretty significant manipulation of the Indigenous set-aside rule. Do you have a sense of why Amazon didn't just get this contract directly to move those files to the cloud? Is it because of a requirement around Indigenous procurement, or is there some other reason why you didn't get that contract directly?
So we don't have visibility on what the overall scope of work was that Dalian was hired to do by the Government of Canada. So there could have been a much broader scope of work that included other potential elements that were delivered as part of their contract with the Government of Canada. So there's a lot of information we don't have to confirm some of your suspicions. In terms of why the Government of Canada did not procure with us directly, at the time the government did not have the ability to procure cloud services. They did not have...
Sorry, what does that mean, they don't have the ability to procure cloud services?
They didn't have a procurement vehicle to buy cloud.
So essentially, they didn't have the bureaucratic structures in place.
Correct.
Okay, but that seems like a bizarre and arbitrary barrier. You're the ones that can do the work. They need you to do the work. But for some bureaucratic and technical reason, they decided they had to go through Dalian when they could have just called you and hired you.
I think you are pointing to some of the elements of why having really good procurement policies in place is really important. So having appropriate practices and policies in place to buy the technology that you need is an extremely important element in thinking about any digital transformation initiative, whether you're a government or a private sector enterprise. There are elements that you have to have in place in order to do things well. One of those, which I've mentioned earlier, is the appropriate kind of talent and workforce to actually lead the project. Another really important element is the ability to actually procure what you need and have the right rules around the procurement of that technology. The third actually is an extremely important element for the people in this room, and that is leadership. These are change management projects. They require leadership in order to drive and ensure that they're able to be executed. Change management is extremely difficult in any organization, and it's especially difficult in a public sector one. And then the fourth is understanding how to actually budget for operational expenses in an IT environment. Traditional IT procurement is for capital assets, and most organizations are still grappling with how to budget for those expenses in an operational sense. So there's a number of elements of what the Government of Canada and all organizations are grappling with in order to have those elements of how to do digital transformation appropriately. So
Actually,
not having policies
Ms. Foster, I'm going to stop you there, but I am sure our next member will probably ask you to continue if they're of interest. I'm just way over the time for Mr. Genuis's line, but that was interesting. Mr. Chen, you have the floor. Of course, you're welcome to pick it up with any questions or allow Ms. Foster to clear answer. I will, of course, let you decide that. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will ask Ms. Foster to finish, but I will premise that by just saying that I appreciate the presence of all the witnesses here today. You have shed light on the relationships or lack thereof you have with Dalian, with GC Strategies, and you have been dragged into this conversation around ArriveCAN. It's, to me, the most intriguing part of what you have discussed is what I see as the larger project, as Ms. Foster is alluding to, of digital adoption and transformation within government. It certainly is a monumental task, but this ArriveCAN situation, I believe, has certainly provided important lessons that government can take forward as we continue down a road of increasing technology. Ms. Foster, your job title includes artificial intelligence. That certainly is high on the radar. And the challenges you have highlighted with respect to the leadership that's needed for change management, the modernizing procurement that was raised earlier, and certainly building the understanding of technology and the capacities within government itself. So please, Ms. Foster, please continue with your testimony.
I was getting very quickly to wrapping up my point, but these are the 4 pillars that organizations need to consider as they embark on digital transformation projects. The other thing that I would love to leave this committee with is that we know that Canadians are eager to interact with their government and access government services on a digital basis. So, the experience of the pandemic was an acceleration of some of those out of necessity and the need to social distance. But we know that Canadians have become very accustomed to accessing services digitally, whether it's buying things on Amazon or listening to music on Spotify or applying for a driver's license. So Canadians want to be able to access these services digitally. I think it's a really important, it is extremely important that government is able to undertake these projects in the way that that Canadians expect in terms of accountability and due diligence, and a very, very high bar on security, which we wholeheartedly support. But we have to make sure that the systems that we're working in are actually designed for the purpose of the objectives that we're trying to meet on behalf of Canadians.